My name is Audrey Wilson, 34 years old, and until last Monday, I was the marketing director at Preston & Shaw, one of the most prestigious firms in Connecticut. When they laid me off, citing budget cuts despite my stellar performance, I said nothing about the tech company I secretly owned or the beach house in my name. That same night, my father, Henry, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Pack your bags. Failures don't belong here." Then my husband Richard spit on me before walking out with his mistress. I never imagined losing everything in 24 hours, but what happened next changed everything. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how they all came to regret their actions. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Springfield, where my father worked his way up from salesman to regional manager at a manufacturing company. From childhood, Henry instilled in me the belief that success was the only acceptable outcome in life. Every report card needed straight, as every competition needed a first-place trophy. Second place meant I simply had not tried hard enough. When I graduated college with honors from Boston University, I immediately jumped into the corporate world, working 60-hour weeks to prove myself. While my friends were out enjoying their 20s, I was hunched over my laptop, determined to make my father proud. The approval I sought rarely came. Instead, each achievement was met with good. Now, what is next? 5 years ago, at a business conference in New York, I met Richard Blackwood. He was charming, confident, and worked as a sales executive for a pharmaceutical company. His smile caught my attention from across the room, and by the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. Our romance moved quickly. Within 6 months, we were engaged, and by the following spring, we were married in a lavish ceremony that my father mostly paid for, reminding me frequently of his generosity. We bought a beautiful colonial-style house in an upscale Connecticut suburb. From the outside, our life seemed perfect. Richard drove a luxury German car. I climbed the corporate ladder at Preston & Shaw, eventually becoming their marketing director by the age of 31. We hosted dinner parties where guests commented on our beautiful home and seemingly perfect marriage. But behind closed doors, things were different. As my career continued to flourish, Richard grew increasingly resentful. What started as playful jokes about my dedication to work turned into passive-aggressive comments. "Another late night, I guess. Preston & Shaw owns you now." When I received my last promotion, Richard barely acknowledged it, changing the subject to a deal he was working on. The more successful I became, the more distant he grew. My relationship with my father remained complicated. Every Sunday dinner at my parents' suburban mansion became an interrogation about my career progress. My father would press for details about my salary, my projects, my next moves. My mother, Elaine, would sit quietly, occasionally patting my hand under the table. When my father became particularly critical, she had spent 38 years in his shadow, and though I could see the sympathy in her eyes, she never contradicted him. "You need to aim for CMO by 35. Audrey," my father would say, cutting into his steak without looking up. "Preston & Shaw has had the same chief marketing officer for 7 years. He must be ready to retire." Henry let her enjoy her dinner. My mother would attempt only to be silenced by his dismissive wave. Meanwhile, at work, things began to change when new management took over Preston & Shaw 18 months ago. The collaborative environment I had thrived in slowly transformed into something more cutthroat. Martin Davis, the new vice president of marketing, who became my direct supervisor, seemed to undermine me at every turn. Projects I had initiated were suddenly reassigned. My input in meetings was frequently interrupted or dismissed. Then strange things started happening. Presentations I had prepared would mysteriously have errors when opened in client meetings. Emails I was certain I had sent would be missing from my outbox. Client feedback that was positive would be reported to upper management as mixed or negative. Rumors about downsizing began circulating through the office. Several longtime employees from other departments were let go, always with the same explanation: budget cuts. Susan Parker, my colleague from the creative team, warned me during a coffee break. "They are pushing out the old guard, Audrey," she whispered. "Anyone who was here before the new management is at risk. They want their own people." What no one at work or in my family knew was that 3 years ago, my grandfather had left me a surprising inheritance. We had been close throughout my childhood, and he had secretly invested in technology stocks that performed extremely well. The inheritance came with a letter that read, "Audrey, always have your own safety net. Independence is the greatest form of security." Taking his advice to heart, I used part of the inheritance to purchase a beautiful beach house in Rhode Island, putting it solely in my name. I also invested in a promising startup tech company called Horizon Digital. What began as a small investment grew substantially as the company flourished, eventually giving me a significant ownership stake. I kept these financial decisions private. Richard had made comments whenever I made independent choices, suggesting that marriages should not have secrets. My father would have insisted I invest the money according to his advice, or criticized me for not using it to move into a more prestigious neighborhood. The beach house became my secret sanctuary, a place I visited occasionally under the guise of work retreats or girls' weekends. My financial independence remained my closely guarded secret, a safety net I never thought I would need to use. But as my work environment grew increasingly hostile and my marriage more strained, I found myself thinking about that beach house more and more often. I never imagined how quickly things would unravel, or how soon I would need that safety net my grandfather had encouraged me to create. Monday mornings at Preston and Shaw typically began with department meetings, and this particular Monday seemed no different. I arrived early as usual, preparing notes for my presentation on the quarterly marketing strategy. The conference room gradually filled with my team members, but I noticed several unfamiliar faces from human resources among them, including Pamela Winters, the HR director who rarely attended our meetings. Martin Davis entered last, avoiding eye contact with me as he took his seat at the head of the table. Before I could begin my presentation, he cleared his throat. "Before we start, I have an announcement," Martin said, his voice unnaturally formal. "As part of our ongoing restructuring, we are making changes to the marketing department effective immediately." My stomach tightened as every eye in the room turned toward me. "Audrey Wilson will be leaving Preston and Shaw today. We thank her for her contributions and wish her the best in future endeavors." The room fell silent. My team members looked down at their notepads or stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to pity. I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. "This is a joke, right?" I finally managed to say. "I assure you it is not Pamela from HR," interjected, sliding a folder across the table. "This contains information about your severance package and continuation of benefits. We will need you to clear out your personal items today. On what grounds am I being terminated?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "We are eliminating your position due to departmental restructuring," Pamela replied mechanically. "This is not a performance-based decision. That was a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. I had consistently exceeded my targets, brought in major clients, and received excellent reviews until Martin took over. Security will assist you in gathering your belongings," Pamela continued. "Company policy for director-level departures." The humiliation of being escorted out by security burned through me as I packed up my office under the watchful eye of a guard named Thomas, who apologetically stood by the door. My family photos, industry awards, and the small plant I had kept alive for 5 years all went into a cardboard box. When I tried to access my computer to save personal contacts, I discovered my login had already been deactivated. My files, including personal photos and documents, were now inaccessible. They had clearly planned this well in advance. As I was about to leave, Susan slipped into my office, quickly embracing me before whispering, "Martin has been meeting with clients behind your back for weeks. This is not about budget. Call me later." The security guard escorted me through the office past colleagues who averted their eyes down the elevator and all the way to my car in the parking garage. As I placed the box in my trunk, the reality began to sink in. After 7 years of dedication, 60-hour weeks, missed vacations, and sacrificed personal time, I had been discarded without warning. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, too stunned to cry. My phone buzzed with text messages from team members expressing shock and support, but they felt hollow. These same people had watched in silence as I was escorted out. The drive home was a blur. I rehearsed how I would tell Richard, imagining he might finally step up and support me through this crisis. Perhaps this shared adversity would even bring us closer. When I pulled into our driveway at 11:30 in the morning, I was surprised to see Richard's car already there. He rarely came home during workdays. For a moment I felt relief. I would not have to wait to share my news. I entered through the garage calling out, "Richard, you home?" Something happened at work. The house was quiet except for muffled sounds coming from upstairs. As I climbed the stairs, I noticed Richard's briefcase and jacket thrown haphazardly on the staircase, unusual for his typically tidy habits. The bedroom door was partially open. I pushed it wider and froze. Richard was hastily dressing, his hair disheveled. The shower was running in our master bathroom. "Audrey, what are you doing home?" His voice cracked with panic. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glimpsed the screen. A message from someone named Jessica with 3 heart emojis. "Who is Jessica?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Richard's face transitioned from shock to anger in seconds. "Why are you snooping through my phone, and why are you not at work?" "I just got fired," I said flatly. "And you did not answer my question." The bathroom door opened, and a young woman appeared wrapped in my bathrobe. She looked to be in her mid-20s with long blonde hair. She froze upon seeing me. "You must be Jessica," I said, surprising myself with my calm tone. "Audrey, this is not what it looks like," Richard began using his sales pitch voice. "Really? Because it looks like you are having an affair in our bed in our home on a Monday morning when you should be at work." Jessica grabbed her clothes and retreated to the bathroom. Richard's expression hardened. "This would not have happened if you had been a real wife instead of a career-obsessed robot," he spat out. "When was the last time you were actually present in this marriage? How long has this been going on?" I demanded, ignoring his attempt to blame me. 6 months, he admitted with a shocking lack of remorse. Jessica understands me. She makes me a priority. 6 months. Half a year of lies. All those late nights he claimed to be working or having drinks with clients he had been with her. "I want both of you out of my house," I said, my hands shaking. Richard laughed. "Your house, I pay half the mortgage. And speaking of money, how is that going to work now that you are unemployed?" The cruel smile that spread across his face told me everything. He had been waiting, perhaps hoping for my career to stumble. "How did you know I lost my job?" "I just found out 2 hours ago." Richard's momentary confusion gave way to another smirk. "I did not know, but I am not surprised. You have been distracted for months." I stepped closer to him. "Get out. We can discuss the house and finances later through lawyers." "Lawyers?" He laughed again. "On what money, Audrey? Your daddy's? Do you think he will support you now that you have failed?" Something in me snapped. I grabbed the framed photo of our wedding day from the dresser and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered across the hardwood floor. Richard's face contorted with rage. He stepped toward me, his finger pointing in my face. "You psychotic? You have nothing without me. Nothing." Then he did something I never imagined possible. He spit in my face. The warm saliva hit my cheek as I stood paralyzed with shock. "Jessica and I were planning to tell you this weekend anyway," he said, pulling a suitcase from the closet and throwing clothes into it. "She is moving in with me. We will be using my bonus to put a down payment on a condo downtown." Jessica emerged from the bathroom, fully dressed, avoiding eye contact, as she quickly gathered her purse and phone. "You can keep this suburban prison," Richard continued. "I never wanted it anyway. It was always your father's idea of success, not mine." My phone rang, cutting through the tension. My father's name flashed on the screen. "Perfect timing," Richard sneered. "Daddy calling to check on his little girl. Maybe he can fix this mess for you too." I declined the call, but moments later, a text appeared. "Come to the house immediately. Your mother and I need to speak with you." Richard zipped his suitcase and grabbed Jessica's hand. At the bedroom door, he turned back to me. "I will be back for the rest of my things. Do not change the locks if you know what is good for you." And then they were gone. I heard the front door slam, followed by the sound of Richard's car backing out of the driveway. I stood in my bedroom, my career and marriage shattered within hours of each other, and now, based on my father's message, there was more to come. The 20-minute drive to my parents' house in Fairfield gave me little time to compose myself. I attempted to wipe away my tears at red lights, applied concealer to the dark circles forming under my eyes, and practiced explanations that might satisfy my father. Nothing seemed adequate. Their house stood imposing as ever at the end of a circular driveway, a 5-bedroom colonial on 2 acres of perfectly landscaped property. My father had purchased it 15 years ago, when he became CEO of his company, a constant physical reminder of his definition of success. My mother opened the door before I could ring the bell. "He is in his study," she whispered, her eyes conveying both sympathy and warning. "William is here too." My younger brother, William, had always been the peacemaker in the family, strategically positioned between my father's expectations and reality. He worked for my father's company, carefully navigating the nepotism, while maintaining enough independence to keep his sanity. I found them in the study, my father behind his mahogany desk, William uncomfortably perched on the leather sofa. Neither stood when I entered. "Sit down, Audrey," my father instructed, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk, positioning me like an employee being reviewed. "I prefer to stand," I replied, summoning what little strength remained. My father's jaw tightened. I received a concerning call from Martin Davis this afternoon. He is an old golf buddy of mine. Of course he was. The connection I had never known about suddenly explained so much about the past 18 months. Martin informed me that you were let go from Preston and Shaw today. He said they had concerns about your commitment and performance for some time. That is completely false, I said, my voice rising. I was their top-performing director. This was political, not performance-based. My father waved his hand dismissively. There are always two sides to these situations, Audrey. The important question is, what is your plan? No sympathy, no benefit of the doubt, just immediate pressure for a solution. I just lost my job 6 hours ago, Dad. I do not have a fully formed plan yet. This is exactly the problem, he replied, standing to emphasize his point. You have always lacked foresight. Success requires anticipation of obstacles. My mother entered with a tray of coffee, her traditional peace offering during family conflicts. Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes, she announced to no one in particular. I did not realize I was staying for dinner, I said. Of course you are, my father replied. We need to discuss your next steps. William may have connections at Brunswick Marketing. William shifted uncomfortably. I could make some calls, he offered his tone, suggesting the futility of such efforts. I appreciate that, but I need some time to process what happened today, I said. My father scoffed. Time is a luxury for the successful, Audrey. You need to be sending out resumes tonight. There is more, I said, deciding to rip off both bandages at once. Richard and I are separating. I caught him with another woman today. The room fell silent. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. William stared at the floor. Well, my father finally said, perhaps if you had focused more on your marriage and less on climbing the corporate ladder, this would not have happened. His words hit me like a physical blow. Are you actually blaming me for Richard's affair? Henry, my mother interjected. That is not fair. Life is not fair, Elaine, he snapped. And Audrey needs to hear the truth. You pushed for that promotion last year despite Richard's concerns about your hours. You insisted on taking that business trip to London when you should have been at his company dinner. Actions have consequences. I could not believe what I was hearing. Richard has been cheating for 6 months with a woman from his office. How exactly is that my fault? Men have needs, Audrey, my father replied, as if explaining something to a child. When wives become too independent, too career-focused, men often seek validation elsewhere. That is disgusting, I whispered. It is reality, he countered. Now you have lost both your job and your marriage in the same day. What does that tell you about your priorities? My mother attempted again to defuse the situation. Let us discuss this over dinner. I made your favorite chicken, Audrey. We moved to the dining room in tense silence. The elaborate table setting with fine china and crystal glasses felt absurdly formal given the circumstances. I spoke with Richard this afternoon, my father announced as we took our seats. The revelation stunned me. You what? He called me very upset. He said, You threw things and became hysterical when he suggested a separation. He was in our bed with another woman, I exclaimed, and he did not suggest a separation. He spit in my face and walked out with her. That does not sound like Richard, my father replied calmly. He has always been level-headed. I am sure you are exaggerating. Why would I make that up? I demanded. Because you are emotional right now, he said. Richard mentioned you have been unstable lately, possibly due to work stress. My brother finally spoke up. Dad, maybe we should hear Audrey's side fully before jumping to conclusions. My father ignored him. Richard also mentioned financial concerns now that you are unemployed. He worried about your spending habits. I laughed bitterly. My spending habits. Richard bought a $40,000 watch last month. He leases a new car every 2 years. Nevertheless, my father continued, you need to consider your financial situation seriously. Your mother and I cannot support poor decisions. I have not asked for your support, I said quietly. Not yet, he replied. But without a job and with a divorce looming, it is only a matter of time. I put down my fork, my appetite completely gone. I will figure this out on my own. How your skill set is specific to a company that just fired you. Your industry is small and word travels fast. Martin mentioned they might provide a reference if you leave quietly, but that goodwill has an expiration date. I have savings, I said, though the joint account Richard and I shared was likely already emptied. Enough for a mortgage, lawyers, and living expenses for how long? 3 months? 6. My father shook his head. This is why I always told you to plan for worst-case scenarios, Henry, my mother said softly. Perhaps now is not the time for lectures. Then when Elaine, after she has bankrupted herself, after she has damaged her reputation beyond repair, he turned back to me. You have 1 week to secure new employment, something comparable to what you had. Otherwise, do not come back to this house with complaints or requests for help. You cannot be serious, I whispered. I am always serious about success and failure, Audrey. You know that I did not raise my children to make excuses or accept defeat. I did not fail, I insisted. I was pushed out by your golf buddy after years of excellent performance. Results are what matter in this world, he replied coldly. And right now, your results show failure on all fronts. I stood up abruptly, my chair screeching against the hardwood floor. Thank you for dinner, Mom. I think I should go. Audrey, please, my mother began. But my father cut her off. Let her go, Elaine. Perhaps some time alone will help her reflect on her choices. As I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my father called after me. Remember what I said, Audrey. 1 week to get your life in order. Pack your bags and figure out where you are going from here. Failures do not belong in this family. The drive away from my parents' house was a blur of tears and anger. I had lost my job, discovered my husband's infidelity, and been rejected by my family all in a single day. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and no idea what tomorrow would bring. The Harborview Hotel was not particularly luxurious, but it was clean and anonymous. The desk clerk barely glanced at me as I checked in, for which I was grateful, given my tear-stained face and disheveled appearance. Room 214 would be my home tonight, possibly longer. I sat on the edge of the queen-sized bed, surrounded by the generic hotel decor, and finally allowed myself to fully break down. The sobs came from someplace deep and primal years of suppressed emotions erupting at once. I cried for my lost career, my betrayed trust, my father's cruelty, and my mother's silent complicity. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. When the initial wave of emotion subsided, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Sarah, my college roommate, and one of the few friends I had maintained despite my workaholic lifestyle. 2 from Megan, my neighbor, who had become a close confidant. A text from William Dad was way out of line. Call if you need anything. I called Sarah first, her familiar voice instantly comforting. Audrey, where are you? I have been trying to reach you for hours. I am at the Harborview Hotel, I said, my voice from crying. Everything fell apart today, Sarah. Everything. I heard about Preston and Shaw. Susan called me. That is complete garbage how they treated you. You know, Susan, we met at your holiday party last year. We have kept in touch, she said. The whole office is in shock. I had no idea they had connected, which made me realize how disconnected I had become from my own life, how little attention I had paid to the relationships around me. Richard was cheating, I added. I caught him today with some woman from his office, and my father basically told me I deserved it for focusing too much on my career. That absolute bastard, Sarah exclaimed. And I wasn't sure if she meant Richard or my father. Both replied. Stay where you are, she continued. I am coming to you, and Megan is with me. We will be there in 30 minutes. True to her word, Sarah arrived with Megan and an overnight bag. They brought wine, chocolate, and their unwavering support. For the first time that day, I felt something other than despair. You need to get a lawyer immediately, Megan advised. She had gone through a divorce 2 years earlier. Richard will try to claim half of everything, and given what you have told us about him, he will not play fair. Diane Hopkins, I remembered suddenly. She helped me set up the beach house purchase and my investment in Horizon Digital. You have a beach house? Sarah asked, surprised. I had never told them about the inheritance or my secret investments. It had become such a habit to keep these things private that I had maintained the secrecy even with my closest friends. My grandfather left me an inheritance 3 years ago, I explained. I used it to buy a place in Rhode Island and invest in a tech startup. Richard does not know. Neither does my family. Megan smiled for the first time that evening. Audrey Wilson, you magnificent secret keeper. That could be your saving grace right now. While they ordered room service, I began taking inventory of what I actually had versus what I had lost. Lost my 60-hour-per-week job, my marriage, my family's support, my house potentially, my sense of security. Had a beach house in my name only, a significant ownership stake in a growing tech company, my education and experience, my professional reputation despite Preston and Shaw's efforts, and apparently friends who would drop everything to sit in a hotel room with me on the worst day of my life. I opened my laptop and pulled up the documents related to Horizon Digital. My initial investment of $50,000 from my inheritance had grown substantially as the company secured additional funding rounds. According to the last valuation, my stake was worth over $2 million on paper. The beach house purchased for $400,000 had likely appreciated as well. "You need to protect these assets before Richard discovers them," Megan urged. "Call Diane first thing tomorrow." While scrolling through my emails, I noticed one from Zoe, my former assistant at Preston and Shaw, sent just hours after I was escorted out. "Martin deleted all your files, but I backed everything up last week when things started feeling weird. I have copies of all your work client contacts and the emails where Martin took credit for your Phillips campaign. Call me when you can. Loyal, perceptive Zoe." I had always appreciated her attention to detail, but never imagined how valuable it would become. Another email caught my attention. This one from Susan. "Check your junk folder for emails from David Nichols from the past 3 months. Martin has been filtering your messages." David Nichols was our biggest client. I immediately checked my junk folder and found dozens of emails from David, including several expressing confusion about why I had stopped responding to his messages and concerns about recent campaign directions. "They sabotaged you," Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. "They deliberately isolated you from your clients." "Martin Davis is my father's golf buddy," I said. "He has probably been feeding my father information for months while setting me up to fail." A text message alert interrupted our conversation. It was from Richard. Checked our joint account. "Needed to secure funds for upcoming expenses. We can discuss division of assets with lawyers." I quickly logged into our bank account to find it completely emptied. $45,000 gone. "Can he do that?" Sarah asked. "Legally, yes. It is a joint account," Megan explained. "But a judge will take this into consideration during divorce proceedings. Document everything." As the night progressed, we formulated a plan. I would call Diane first thing in the morning to begin divorce proceedings and protect my assets. I would move to the beach house temporarily until things settled. I would use Zoe's backed-up files to establish what had really happened at Preston and Shaw. Around midnight, Sarah and Megan finally fell asleep on the second queen bed. But I remained awake, my mind racing with everything that had transpired and everything that needed to be done. I remembered my grandfather's words from his letter. "Independence is the greatest form of security." He had known somehow that I would need this safety net. Perhaps he had recognized in me the same drive that had isolated me from authentic relationships. Perhaps he had seen how my pursuit of my father's approval had led me to ignore my own needs. Or perhaps he had simply wanted to give me options his own daughter, my mother, had never had. By dawn, my tears had dried and a new emotion had taken their place: determination. I had spent my entire life seeking validation from my father and later from Richard. I had pursued external markers of success while neglecting to define success for myself. That ended today. As the first light of morning filtered through the cheap hotel curtains, I made 3 promises to myself. 1. I would rebuild my life on my own terms, not according to anyone else's definition of success. 2. I would never again make myself small or silent to accommodate someone else's ego. 3. I would remember this feeling of rock bottom, not to dwell in it, but to recognize how far I would climb from here. I picked up my phone and dialed Diane Hopkins' number. When her voicemail answered, I left a clear, concise message. "Diane, this is Audrey Wilson. I need your help protecting my assets and beginning divorce proceedings. Also, I may have a wrongful termination case to discuss. Please call me as soon as possible." Next, I texted Zoe. "Can you meet today? I need those files and your insights on what really happened." The night of devastation had transformed into a morning of action. And for the first time in my adult life, I was acting solely for myself. Not to please my father or support my husband or impress my colleagues. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. As Sarah and Megan stirred awake, I made one final call to the beach house caretaker, arranging to have the place prepared for my arrival. It was time to claim the safety net my grandfather had helped me create. It was time to disappear from the life everyone thought they knew and emerge as the woman I was meant to be. Diane Hopkins' office projected exactly the kind of confidence I needed. Located in downtown Hartford, the corner suite featured floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and walls adorned with her law degrees and professional recognitions. Diane herself, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with prematurely silver hair, had the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had broken countless glass ceilings. "Let me get this straight," she said after I had recounted the events of the previous day. In the span of 24 hours, you were terminated from your position, discovered your husband's infidelity, and were essentially disowned by your father. That about covers it, I replied. And your husband has emptied your joint account of $45,000. Yes, but he is unaware of your ownership of the beach property in Rhode Island, or your stake in Horizon Digital. Correct. Those were purchased with my inheritance and kept separate. Diane smiled for the first time. Then we are starting from a much better position than most of my clients. First order of business is to file for divorce immediately citing adultery. Rhode Island is a false state which works in our favor. She pulled out several forms and began filling them out with practice deficiency. Next, we need to document the removal of funds from your joint account. This will be considered dissipation of marital assets and work strongly in your favor. What about my job? I asked. Do I have any recourse there? Possibly. Employment law is not my specialty, but if you have evidence of sabotage or discrimination, there could be a wrongful termination case. I can refer you to a colleague who specializes in that area. By the end of our 2-hour meeting, we had drafted divorce papers, documented the emptied bank account, and created a strategy for protecting my separate assets. Diane also advised me to relocate to the beach house immediately. Rhode Island residency will simplify the divorce proceedings, she explained. And frankly, it puts physical distance between you and the people who have betrayed you. As I left her office, I felt the first stirrings of control returning. The next stop was the beach house, a place that had previously been just an occasional retreat, but would now become my sanctuary. The property sat on a small bluff overlooking the Atlantic, a modern 2-bedroom structure with walls of glass facing the ocean. The caretaker, Mr. Jennings, had prepared it as requested, stocking the refrigerator and airing out rooms that had been closed for months. Will you be staying long this time, Miss Wilson? He asked as he handed me the keys. Indefinitely, I replied. This is home now. That afternoon, I met Zoe at a coffee shop halfway between Connecticut and Rhode Island. She arrived with an external hard drive containing all my work files, client communications, and evidence of the sabotage that had been occurring. Martin had it redirect all emails from top clients to himself starting 3 months ago, she explained. He would respond as if he were you deliberately missing key client requests or changing strategy points you had established. How did you discover this? It Guy Harold has a crush on me, she admitted with a slight blush. He mentioned the unusual email routing protocol, thinking I already knew about it. The hard drive contained dozens of examples of Martin taking credit for my work, altering my presentations before client meetings, and systematically undermining my position. It was more than enough for a wrongful termination case, possibly even a defamation suit. What will you do now? Zoe asked. First, I need to secure my future, I replied. But after that, there will be consequences for Preston and Shaw. My next call was to the board of Horizon Digital. As a significant investor, I had attended meetings, but taken a mostly passive role, allowing the founders to run the company without interference. Today, I requested an emergency meeting. 2 days later, I sat across from Alex Mercer and Jordan Williams, the co-founders of Horizon, in their San Francisco office. I had flown in specifically for this meeting using one of my credit cards that Richard did not know about. Audrey, we were surprised by your request, Alex began. Is everything okay? Actually, no, I replied honestly. My professional and personal circumstances have changed dramatically, and I need to take a more active role in my investments. I explained my situation without unnecessary emotion or detail. These were businessmen, and I approached them as a businesswoman. I see, Jordan said when I finished, and how can we help? 2 things. First, I would like to formalize my advisory role with Horizon. My marketing expertise could benefit the company as you enter your growth phase. They exchanged glances, clearly intrigued. We have been discussing bringing on marketing leadership. Alex admitted your background would be ideal. Second, I continued, I would like to accelerate the next funding round. My intelligence suggests Preston and Shaw is facing internal challenges that could present an acquisition opportunity. This was a calculated risk. Preston and Shaw was not publicly traded, but industry rumors suggested they were seeking additional investment due to client losses. If Horizon could position itself as a potential buyer or merger partner, it would send shockwaves through the industry. By the end of the meeting, we had drafted an agreement making me the chief marketing advisor for Horizon Digital, with a modest salary and additional equity compensation. More importantly, they agreed to my strategic suggestion regarding Preston and Shaw. The news broke the following week. Tech upstart Horizon Digital signals interest in traditional marketing firm Preston and Shaw. The article quoted me directly as a major investor and newly appointed chief marketing advisor, discussing the synergies between digital innovation and traditional marketing expertise. The reaction was immediate. My phone exploded with messages from former colleagues, industry contacts, and clients curious about this unexpected development. The Preston & Shaw stock price jumped at the prospect of acquisition, then plummeted when internal documents mysteriously leaked to industry publications, showing client dissatisfaction and management turmoil. Martin Davis called me directly, his voice strained. "What the hell are you doing, Audrey?" "Exploring business opportunities," I replied calmly. "Is there a problem?" "You know exactly what you are doing. The board is in crisis mode because of these leaks and acquisition rumors. Perhaps they should have considered the implications of dismissing their top-performing director under false pretenses," I suggested. "By the way, how is the Phillips account?" I heard David was unhappy with recent campaign directions. His sharp intake of breath confirmed what I suspected. The Phillips account worth millions annually was in jeopardy. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Nothing from you or Preston & Shaw," I replied truthfully. "I have moved on to better opportunities, but I would suggest reviewing those termination documents your HR department prepared. My lawyer has some concerns about their accuracy and legality." The following day, Pamela from HR reached out with a significantly improved severance package and a letter retracting any negative implications about my performance. The offer included 6 months of salary, continued benefits, and a neutral reference for future employment. Diane advised me to accept the improved terms while still reserving the right to pursue legal action. "This shows they are worried," she noted. "We can use this leverage in negotiations." Meanwhile, Richard had finally discovered that his actions had consequences. His attempts to access our home equity line of credit were blocked by the freeze Diane had placed on our marital assets. His angry voicemails escalated from demanding, "I be reasonable to begging for a conversation. You cannot just disappear and freeze everything," his most recent message pleaded. "We need to talk about this like adults." I forwarded each message to Diane without responding directly. When Richard showed up at the beach house unannounced, I calmly informed him that any communication needed to go through our respective attorneys and closed the door. Through the window, I watched his face contort with rage as he realized I was no longer the accommodating wife he could manipulate. When he began pounding on the door, I called the local police who escorted him from the property with a warning about trespassing. The most surprising call came from Jessica, Richard's mistress. "I need to tell you something," she said when I reluctantly answered. "Richard has been lying to me too." We met at a restaurant halfway between Rhode Island and Connecticut. Jessica looked younger in daylight, barely 25 and visibly nervous. "Richard told me you two were already separated," she began. "He said you had agreed to divorce months ago, but were keeping it quiet for financial reasons." "That was a lie," I said simply. "I know that now." She slid a folder across the table. "He also has a gambling problem. These are credit card statements I found in his apartment. He has been hiding them from you." The statements revealed over $70,000 in cash advances taken at casinos over the past year. Richard had been draining our finances long before he emptied our joint account. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because he used me," she replied, her voice hardening. "And when I confronted him about lying about your marriage, he became scary, verbally abusive. I recognized the pattern from my parents' relationship. I will not be that woman." I thanked her for the information and passed it to Diane, who added it to our growing case against Richard. His financial deception would further undermine any claims he might make on my separate assets. 3 weeks after what I now thought of as the collapse, my father finally tracked me down. He appeared at the beach house one Sunday morning, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Your mother is worried about you," he said when I opened the door, unable to admit his own concern. "I am fine," I replied, not inviting him in. "You have not been returning our calls. I have been busy rebuilding the life that collapsed while you were golfing with Martin Davis." His eyes widened slightly. "You know about that?" "I know a lot of things now that I did not know a month ago," I said. "Like how my own father undermined my career by feeding information to my boss, or how quickly he would believe the worst about his daughter without hearing her side." "That is not fair, Audrey. I simply had concerns about your work-life balance." "No, you had concerns about losing control. You always have. You controlled Mom her entire life, and when I started building my own success, you could not handle it." He flinched as if I had struck him. "I only wanted what was best for you." "What you thought was best," I corrected. but you never asked what I wanted or needed. And when everything fell apart, you blamed me rather than offering support. I was trying to motivate you, he insisted, to push you to bounce back quickly by telling me failures do not belong in this family by taking Richard's side without question. For the first time in my life, I saw my father at a loss for words. If you want to be part of my life moving forward, I continued, things will be very different. I make my own decisions now. I define my own success, and I do not tolerate disrespect, not even from you. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving him standing on my porch with the sound of waves crashing behind him. Through the window, I watched him stand there for several minutes before finally turning back to his luxury car and driving away. That afternoon, I received a text from my mother. I am proud of you more than you know. It was the most independent statement I had ever heard from her. My strategic comeback was well underway. With secure housing, new professional opportunities, and legal protections in place, I was no longer in crisis mode. Now I could focus on the longer-term reshaping of my life. And perhaps most satisfyingly, watching those who had underestimated me face the consequences of their actions. 6 weeks after the collapse, I stood on the deck of my beach house, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the Atlantic. These quiet morning moments had become my daily ritual, a time to reflect on how dramatically my life had transformed. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Preston and Shaw stocks plummet amid client exodus and executive shakeup. I smiled as I opened the article to find exactly what I had anticipated. Following the leaked client dissatisfaction, reports 3 major accounts had pulled their business, citing relationship breakdowns and strategic misalignment. The Phillips account, worth $7 million annually, had been the first to go. The article continued. In a stunning development, Vice President of Marketing Martin Davis and several senior executives have been removed by the board of directors following an internal investigation into client management practices. Potential ethical violations. Justice had a particular sweetness when it arrived through natural consequences rather than direct action. I had not leaked those client reports, though I certainly knew who had. Zoe, with her quiet efficiency and surprising network of allies within Preston and Shaw, had simply ensured that truth found its way to the appropriate channels. My phone rang, displaying Susan's name. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "Just reading it now," I replied. "How are things inside?" "Chaos," she said, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. The board brought in auditors who discovered Martin had been falsifying client feedback reports for months. They also found evidence he had been redirecting your emails and taking credit for your strategies. And Pamela from HR resigned yesterday. Apparently, she was warned about potential legal exposure for her role in your termination. The conversation shifted to Susan's own situation. She had been offered a promotion to fill the leadership vacuum, but was considering other options. "Actually," she ventured, "I was wondering about opportunities at Horizon Digital. Their marketing approach is fascinating." This was the 3rd such inquiry I had received from former colleagues in the past week. I promised to make an introduction to the hiring team, though I recused myself from direct involvement to avoid any appearance of poaching. My consulting business, Wilson Strategic Communications, had launched 2 weeks earlier and already secured 3 clients, including David Nichols, who had been eager to work with me directly after the Preston and Shaw debacle. The beach house's 2nd bedroom had been converted into a functional home office, and I had hired a virtual assistant to manage scheduling and administration. Later that morning, Diane called with updates on the divorce proceedings. Richard's lawyer reached out about settlement, she reported. They are suddenly very eager to resolve this quickly. "Why the change?" I asked, though I had my suspicions. "It seems those gambling debts were just the tip of the iceberg. Richard borrowed money from some unsavory characters. He needs cash, and he needs it soon. How much does he want? That is the interesting part. He is offering to sign away all claims to your separate assets, and the house in exchange for $50,000 in debt forgiveness. It was a surprisingly reasonable offer, considering Richard could have dragged out the proceedings for years, demanding half of everything despite his infidelity. "What is your advice?" I asked. "Take it," Diane said without hesitation. "This is a clean break at minimal cost. We have him over a barrel and he knows it." I agreed to the terms, feeling an odd mix of relief and sadness. Despite everything, finalizing the end of my marriage still carried emotional weight. That evening, I signed the settlement papers Diane had couriered over. By next week, my divorce would be final, just 2 months after discovering Richard's betrayal. The following day brought another unexpected visitor to my door. Jessica stood on my porch looking uncomfortable but determined. "I am sorry to bother you," she began. But I thought you should know Richard has been telling people you forced him into an unfair settlement. That does not surprise me, I replied, finding I no longer cared about Richard's narratives. I told him to stop, she continued. We had a huge fight about it. He got physical. I noticed then the fading bruise near her eye, partially concealed by makeup. Are you okay? Do you need help? She shook her head. I am staying with my sister now, but I wanted you to know. I filed a police report, and I saved the text where he admitted what he did to you. How he planned it with your father's help. My father? I asked, suddenly alert. Richard said your dad had been feeding him information about your work troubles for months. They discussed how to handle you when the inevitable breakdown happened. She pulled out her phone, showing me text exchanges that confirmed this conspiracy. May I have copies of these? I asked, my voice steady despite the renewed sense of betrayal. That is why I came, she replied. I thought you deserved to know the truth. After she left, I forwarded the text to Diane with a simple message. FYI, no action needed. The revelation about my father's deeper involvement hurt, but it no longer had power over me. I had already begun the process of redefining that relationship on my terms. Speaking of my father, he had made 3 attempts to see me since his first visit. Each time I had declined, stating I needed more time. His most recent message had shown the first signs of genuine reflection. I may have been wrong about some things. When you are ready to talk, I will listen more and lecture less. It was progress, however small. My mother had been more direct in her communication, calling weekly with updates about her life and asking thoughtful questions about mine. She had even mentioned taking a part-time job at the local library, something my father had previously discouraged. Henry does not like it, she admitted during our last call, but I told him it was not up for discussion. The subtle shift in their 40-year power dynamic fascinated me. Perhaps my own stand against my father's control had given her permission to reclaim some independence. My brother William had become an unexpected ally, visiting the beach house twice and calling regularly. During his last visit, he had confessed his own frustrations with our father's management style at the company. I've been thinking about other opportunities, he admitted. Watching you rebuild so quickly has been inspiring. 7 weeks after the collapse, I received an email from Jackson Reynolds, the CEO of Preston & Shaw. I owe you an apology, it began. Recent investigations have revealed the extent of the misconduct that led to your departure. I was misled by people I trusted, and I failed to perform due diligence before approving your termination. The email continued with an offer to return to Preston & Shaw as chief marketing officer with a substantial salary, increase in reporting directly to him. 3 months earlier, this would have seemed like the ultimate vindication. Now it felt like a step backward. My response was polite but firm. Thank you for recognizing the situation and for your offer. At this time, I am committed to my role with Horizon Digital and my consulting practice. I wish Preston & Shaw success in rebuilding client trust. That same week, Richard made one last desperate attempt to alter our divorce settlement, claiming he had been under duress when he agreed to the terms. The judge reviewing the evidence of his infidelity, financial deception, and gambling debts dismissed his petition and finalized the divorce with the original settlement intact. As I approached the 2-month mark of my new life, I decided to host a small gathering at the beach house. Sarah, Megan, Zoe, Susan, and a few other women who had supported me through the transition came for a weekend of relaxation and celebration. To Audrey, Sarah toasted as we sat on the deck watching the sunset, who lost everything and found herself. The women cheered, and for the first time since the collapse, I felt truly celebratory. The justice I had received had not come through vengeance or direct retaliation, but through standing firmly in my truth and allowing natural consequences to unfold. Martin had lost his position due to his own ethical violations. Richard had destroyed his reputation and finances through his own deception and addiction. My father was slowly recognizing the cost of his controlling behavior as both his children established boundaries, and his wife asserted independence, and I had discovered that losing what I thought was everything had actually freed me to create something more authentic and fulfilling. The justice served was not just about others facing consequences, but about me finally claiming the life I deserved. 1 year after what I now simply call the transformation, rather than the collapse, I stood in the newly renovated living room of my beach house, surrounded by friends celebrating my 35th birthday. The changes in the physical space mirrored my personal evolution. Walls that once held generic artwork now featured vibrant paintings by local artists. Furniture chosen for functionality had been replaced by pieces that brought me joy, Large windows that had previously been partially obscured by heavy drapes now stood open to the ocean view, filling the space with natural light. My professional life had similarly transformed. Wilson's Strategic Communications had grown from a one-woman consultancy to a boutique firm with 5 employees and a prestigious client roster. My advisory role with Horizon Digital had expanded, and the company had indeed acquired portions of Preston & Shaw in a strategic partnership that industry publications called Revolutionary Speech called Sarah raising her glass. The small gathering of friends turned expectantly toward me. A year ago, I would have prepared detailed remarks for this moment. I began with a smile. I would have rehearsed in front of a mirror and timed myself to ensure I did not take up too much space or attention, knowing laughter rippled through the room. Today, I am going to speak from the heart, which is a skill I have been practicing this year. When my life imploded 12 months ago, I thought I had lost everything. My career, my marriage, my family relationships, my sense of identity, all gone within 24 hours. I paused, looking around at the supportive faces surrounding me. What I did not realize then was that I had been living in a beautiful cage, one partially constructed by others, but maintained by me. Losing those external structures forced me to confront the uncomfortable question: who am I when all the labels and roles are stripped away? The room had grown quiet, friends leaning forward slightly. The answer did not come quickly or easily. It came through therapy sessions with Dr. Laura, who helped me recognize patterns of seeking external validation. It came through quiet mornings watching the sunrise, journaling about who I wanted to become. It came through rebuilding relationships based on authenticity rather than performance. I gestured toward the windows where the Atlantic stretched endlessly toward the horizon. I have learned that healing is not linear. There are still days when I wake up angry about the betrayals, days when I question my decisions, days when old habits of people-pleasing resurface. But those days grow fewer as I practice self-rust and boundary setting. My gaze found Megan, whose own divorce had preceded mine and whose guidance had been invaluable. I have learned that rock bottom can be a foundation. Everything I have built this year, I built on my own terms, aligned with my values, rather than someone else's expectations. I raised my glass and returned toast. To all of you who stood by me, who offered couches to sleep on and shoulders to cry on, who celebrated small victories and reminded me of my worth when I forgot it, and to those who are no longer in my life, but taught me powerful lessons about what I will and will not accept. Thank you all. The party continued late into the evening, friends lingering on the deck under string lights as waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. As conversations flowed around me, I reflected on the journeys of those who had played central roles in my transformation story. Richard's downfall had been swift and comprehensive. After our divorce was finalized, his gambling addiction spiraled further out of control. He lost his sales position when he missed critical client meetings, and subsequent employers quickly discovered his unreliability. According to mutual acquaintances, he had moved to Las Vegas 6 months ago, working as a casino host and still chasing the next big win. Jessica had long since moved on, wisely extracting herself from his chaos. The knowledge of his decline brought me no joy, only a distant sadness for the man I had once loved, and the demons he could not overcome. I had forgiven him, not for his benefit, but for my own peace of mind. Carrying anger toward him only gave him continued power over my emotional state. My father's journey had been more complex. 3 months after our confrontation at the beach house, he had suffered a minor heart attack, a wake-up call that prompted reflection on his priorities and relationships. During his recovery, my mother had taken unprecedented control of household decisions, and he had been too weak to resist the shifting power dynamic. By the time he regained his physical strength, the emotional landscape of their marriage had permanently changed. My mother continued working at the library, joined a book club, and reconnected with old friends, all without seeking his approval. Our reconciliation began with a handwritten letter he sent 6 months ago, acknowledging his controlling behavior and expressing genuine regret for his response to my crisis. I measured success by external achievements rather than character and happiness, he wrote. In doing so, I nearly lost what matters most, my relationship with my children. We were rebuilding slowly on my terms. He had visited the beach house twice, awkwardly adapting to his new role as a guest in my space rather than an authority figure. During his last visit, he had actually asked questions about my business and listened to the answers without offering unsolicited advice, a small miracle by our family standards. My mother's transformation had perhaps been the most surprising. At 62, she had discovered a capacity for independence she had never exercised during her marriage. She had opened her own bank account, taken a computer class at the community college, and started expressing opinions that sometimes directly contradicted my father's. "I wasted decades trying to make your father happy at the expense of my own needs," she told me during a private lunch last month. "Watching you rebuild your life on your own terms inspired me to examine what I truly want from my remaining years." William had finally left our father's company, accepting a position with a competitor that better aligned with his values and management style. The professional separation had ironically improved their personal relationship, removing the complicated dynamics of working for a controlling parent. My own healing journey continued daily. Dr. Laura, my therapist, had helped me identify and address patterns of seeking external validation and perfectionism. Success and self-worth are not the same thing, she reminded me regularly. One can fluctuate while the other remains constant. I had developed practices that supported my well-being: morning meditation, overlooking the ocean, regular exercise time boundaries around work, and social connections that energized rather than depleted me. I had learned to listen to my body's signals of stress and respond with self-care, rather than pushing through at all costs. Romantically, I had proceeded cautiously. Daniel Reynolds, an ethical investment advisor I met through business connections, had become a regular presence in my life over the past 4 months. Our relationship developed slowly with clear communication and mutual respect. Unlike Richard, Daniel appreciated my professional success and had his own well-established career, eliminating the competitive dynamic that had poisoned my marriage. One of the most fulfilling aspects of my new life was the mentorship program I had established for women in business. Using my connections and experience, I created a network that provided guidance opportunities and support for women navigating corporate environments or launching their own ventures. The monthly meetings held in my home had become a highlight for all involved, creating a community of ambitious women who lifted each other up rather than competing. 3 months ago, while organizing old papers, I discovered another letter from my grandfather, tucked into a book he had given me years earlier. Audrey read, "The true measure of success is not what you accumulate, but who you become in the process. Choose growth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and freedom over security when necessary. These choices will serve you well in difficult times." His wisdom, reaching across time and circumstance, had brought me to tears. I had visited his grave the following weekend, placing fresh flowers and silently thanking him for the foresight that had provided not just financial security, but philosophical guidance when I needed it most. As the birthday celebration wound down and friends began departing with warm hugs and promises to meet again, soon I walked alone to the edge of my property where wooden steps led down to the beach. The night air carried a slight chill, and the moon cast a silver path across the dark water. In this quiet moment, I reflected on the profound lessons of the past year. True security comes from within, not from external sources like relationships, jobs, or family approval. Crisis reveals character both in yourself and in those around you. Rebuilding requires equal parts forgiveness and boundaries, releasing the past while protecting your future. Success defined by others is a moving target you can never quite reach. Success defined by alignment with your values brings lasting fulfillment. The greatest freedom comes from owning your story completely, the painful chapters as well as the triumphant ones. As I turned back toward my home, lights glowing warmly against the night sky, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the collapse that had forced me to rebuild on a stronger foundation. The path had been painful, but necessary, leading me to a life that was authentically mine, in a way my previous existence had never been. The transformation was ongoing, a daily choice to live according to my truth, rather than others' expectations. But standing here 1 year after the darkest day of my life, I could honestly say I would not change what happened. Every loss had created space for something more genuine to grow in its place. Have you ever experienced a moment when losing what you thought you needed actually led to gaining what you truly deserved? I would love to hear your stories of unexpected transformation in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic stories of resilience and growth. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, share this video as a reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most meaningful transformations. Thank you for being part of my journey. And remember that your story is still being written with every plot twist, an opportunity for a more authentic life. Music.